Okay, so hey everybody, welcome. The real intent of today, I think, originally was to do a little bit of presentation and then panel, but it's really so much more valuable to do the panel stuff. I mean, we all learn the best from our peers, asking tough questions and getting real answers. So if you guys are okay, we're just going to jump right into panel stuff. Yeah.
Where are you all from?
That's my next thing. You're right on it. So I'm Tim Lawrence. I'm the CEO of LHPH Capital. Let you guys introduce yourselves, where you're from, where your dealership is, and maybe a little bit about your dealership.
Okay. So I'm Joe Powell. I'm from Southwest Oklahoma. I started in leasing in 2008 with one dealership and then second and third. So we have kind of three small dealerships, and we do Lease-Here, Pay-Here 99.9% of the time.
Dustin Kerr, I live in Southwest Missouri. We have dealerships in Oklahoma, Texas, and Northwest Arkansas. Started Buy Here, Pay Here out of a franchise dealer in 01, and started doing leasing probably in 2005 as we moved into Kansas. And currently all we do is Lease-Here, Pay Here. We no longer do Buy Here, Pay Here in any of our locations.
So, direct follow-up to you, Dustin. When did you make that transition, and why did it make sense for you?
Yeah, so at the time we were operating a couple of small Buy Here, Pay Here's in little towns in Oklahoma, out of a franchise store, and we were expanding just across the state line into Kansas. Live right in the corner where everything's real close together. But the difference being in Kansas, the dealer had to collect the sales tax. So we started looking at cash flow. That was a fairly big deal. Where in Oklahoma, we didn't have to worry about it. So as we started looking at pro formas and how we were going to cash flow it, we wanted to be able to do it without borrowing money at that time. We were starting to get familiar with leasing. I really dug into it and made the decision to go that route in Kansas. At that time, it was all because of the sales tax and the cash flow. There were many more advantages that came about after that, but that was the primary reason that we went that route in Kansas at that time. That was our first dipping our toe into Lease-Here, Pay Here.
And then Joe, what about for you? When did you decide that was the avenue for you?
So I went to work at a franchise dealership in 05 and always wanted to have my own lot. So as these magazines kept coming out, kept talking about leasing being more profitable and easier for the customer. The customer can get more car for less money. The dealer can be more profitable. That was really something that we wanted to look at. But some of the things that really meant the most to me was the accounting side. I started with me. I was a one-man show when I started. So I didn't want to have to sell cars to related finance companies. I didn't want to have to repossess cars and get refunds. All of that nonsense just was brain dead to me. I thought it was ridiculous to have to, like somebody said, have to recoup thousands of dollars in losses or pay taxes on money that I hadn't earned yet. So everything that was a hassle with Buy Here, Pay Here, the taxes, the sales taxes, we were paying taxes on money across the table. I didn't have to worry about selling and everything. So in my world, if it's not quicker, easier, and simpler, it's out the door. So Lease-Here, Pay Here, for me, there was no other way I was going to go about it.
How did you get introduced to it? Just the magazine?
Yep.
Like the normal Buy Here, Pay Here?
Yeah, so I started looking at Buy Here, Pay Here, started looking at Lease-Here, Pay Here, and there was night and day difference on how one was going to take so much time, so many resources that I could devote to selling cars or buying cars, or as a one-man guy, we all started detailing cars. You know what I mean? So all of those hassles, after I checked it out, in Oklahoma, we, since our leases are 12 months or longer, we go ahead and pay the sales tax when the title is changed. So, but the customer handles that because it's a lease purchase, so that was easier on us. But a lot of it was about the the taxes to them. I mean, and that's cash flow, you know, or paying an accountant to have to come in and say, well, you had $11 million in revenue, but there's a $13 million error. We don't play that game.
Okay, so it's gonna be best if you all can start interacting with us sooner, so that I'm not just coming up with questions. I have many questions on this list, but I wanna know what you all have to ask.
The customer files bankruptcy. Can that be included in the lease, or can you go pick up your car if they're delinquent?
So, obviously, we stay the titled owner of the vehicle. The customer is the registered leasing with the state. So my name is on the title, okay? So the car is still technically my car. You know what I mean? So yes, I can go get my car as the title owner of the car. Now, if the customer calls the cops and they get involved, then it obviously becomes a civil matter. So they want us to go to civil court over that. But the repossession laws are better since I own the car than being a lien holder and you owning the car per se. And also, in bankruptcy, 9 times out of 10, we can get removed in bankruptcy court because the leasing does not own any part of the car, so therefore we're released. From time to time, that doesn't happen, and we set up payments.
So you still have to wait the 90-day period. If they file bankruptcy, you get the automatic stay or relief, it's automatic stay. You still have to wait that period, or if they're delinquent, you can go get your collateral right away.
No, that's federal law. I wouldn't go get my car if they file, because they still have a document that says they have some right to have that car. But you can, before that time, we can get our car. But federal law, once they file, you need to quit calling them and going and get their car.
Same with us. We've rarely had, I'm sure it's happened once or twice, but normally when we get the notification or get notified by the trustee or the attorney, we let them know it's a lease. And almost every time they made arrangements for us to get our car back. I can't even, I'm sure it's happened at some point, but I can't remember having an issue with it. It is, again, if we're going to repossess it prior to that, we don't worry about it. But we just had one specific in Arkansas the other day. We got the notice, the trustee called us, told him it's a lease. He made arrangements for the customer to drop off the car. It is usually that simple.
And a lot of times, when the customer goes and talks to their bankruptcy attorney, they don't tell them that it's lease. They're making payments on the car. So their lawyer doesn't even know kind of what they're thinking.
Do the customers know it's a lease?
Of course. But we disclose all that 100% of the time. But as we all know, customers go in and say, yeah, I'm making payments to Dustin here and Martin Creek, and that's where we're doing all that at. So
they may not know that there's a difference in how it's handled in the bankruptcy situation, and because it's really a bankruptcy remote situation, it's an either or. It's once everything's complete, the judge is going to ask you, are you going to keep making payments, current payments on the lease, or are you going to turn it in? There's no cram down or anything else. It's just, this is what it is. And so by preemptively going to the attorneys in advance, it's easier to just say, hey, this is a lease. You'll have to make a decision anyway. Let's do this now.
we've had lawyers call and say, hey, so-and-so's filing bankruptcy, and we'll get back with you in 90 days or so, and we let them know, well, you know, the problem is they don't own the car, and they have a payment due Friday, and this is a lease, and the lawyer's like, oh, it's a lease? Yes, sir. Oh, fine, he'll be in Friday, maybe. That happens.
We usually do well in bankruptcy cases. We collect well of it. I don't want the car back, but if it comes to that, I would like to know that I can get it back.
You still own the car?
Yeah. Eric, you got a question?
Yeah, so if we've got side-by-side deals of buy here, pay here, or lease here, pay here, talk about differences in default, what I'm charging off versus a typical buy here, pay here contract versus a lease here, pay here contract, like what's...
So on the,
Yeah, so I've got a customer on a 3-year deal, he makes it 18 months, you know, what are the procedures? I know they vary state from state, but talk about that a little bit.
yeah, so I think I answered your question here. As far as, at least what we see in actual charge-off rates, we don't see much of a difference in operated buy here, pay here, lease here, pay here. But you're not charging off a balance, right? So if you're talking about on your books, there's no balance that you're charging off because you don't have a receivable on the books.
Okay.
So you don't have that part of it. Do we still track it? We do, but it's not something that we're tracking on a on a P&L. We track it just like we would. We know we want to hit certain goals on our charge-off rate, repossession rate, collateral recovery rate, but you don't see that on because that balance isn't on your books.
So you don't set it up as a receivable, where is it? What is
Well,
it?
It's kind of an appendix is what a lot of accountants do. They'll put it as an unearned accounts receivable,
Okay.
so you're not having to, it's not,
Yeah, so not to get too much into the accounting side, but on your asset side, there's going to be the receivable there, and then there's going to be a contra receivable just underneath it for the same amount of that receivable. And that's not really what you're tracking on your balance sheet. What you're tracking is the cost of the vehicle to you as an asset. So it's a fixed asset on your books that's depreciating slowly over time. So it's fixed asset less accumulated depreciation is where it is on your balance sheet. And then if you're going to do anything on your P&L, it's typically a market evaluation adjustment. Once you get the vehicle back, there are two methods. You're going to keep depreciating it over time and not make an adjustment, or if you're going to, then you're going to do a market evaluation adjustment based off of what black book value is or whatever book value is you're using systematically.
Okay.
Is that the same though with the RFC?
You don't
So
sell
related-
an RFC, do
You
you?
don't
Yeah.
need an RFC, but you can
We
have
do.
an RFC.
Right.
And yeah, it would be the same way.
Collect through.
All right, what other questions?
Do you put liens on your leases?
we do not.
No.
We have considered it primarily because from time to time, you'll get an insurance company, say one of our customers is in an accident based on somebody else hit them. Well, that insurance company will be talking to the driver, and sometimes that insurance company will write them the check because they don't have a title to the car, they're not lien owner.
Sure.
So we have considered putting a lien of ourselves on the title, just so whatever's searched for in the system would come up a little bit more often.
So in the state of Iowa, they will not allow us to put a lien on it if we're the title holder.
One thing that Oklahoma made us do is because initially we were buying the car in our name from Dustin. We would buy the car. When we would sell the car, we would title the car back in our name. So now then the state came up and said, well, this is something's going on here. So now then we sell the car back to us as solutions owner / lessor. So that moves us from dealership to a financer's position on the title.
And we put liens on all of our cars for all the reasons Joe just said.
Sure. Well, we did until we were told not to, so.
You might look and see if you can not put your dealership / lessor.
Well, we do our related finance company, so it's KMC Finance, that's the leaseor.
But you collect through it, but you don't sell it because there's nothing to sell.
Right, the AutoSmart sells the lease to KMC Finance.
Not having any experience with the leasing stuff, what about maintenance and repairs?
So I think you do this whether it's buy here, pay here, or lease here, pay here. I don't know that this changed a whole lot. We've always taken the approach, whether it was buy here, pay here, or lease here, pay here. We're hoping to get that car back at some point. We try to encourage our customers to maintain these cars, but we all know how that works. Long story short, we try to maintain the cars. We offer free oil changes. If it's something that needs to be fixed, it's an oil leak that the customer's not going to fix, we do that. I can probably argue the other side of not, but our business model is, we're gonna try to keep that car running. We hope to get that, we're buying a car up front that we hope is gonna run for a long time. We're recomming it correctly the first time. We are hoping to get that car back, not through repossession so much, but at the, the customer gets down to a low balance, we're hoping to get that car back and be able to resell it, so we help to maintain it.
So you do all the regular maintenance, brakes and oil changes and.
We do the oil changes for sure. As they come in for the oil changes, we have that car evaluated. If there's something that needs to be fixed, we'll talk to the customer about it. We'll try to get them to pay for it. Ultimately, we're not gonna let it go out there if it's got a leaking water pump or something, that we're gonna get it taken care of.
Do you see any difference in pay performance? I'm just leasing it, so it doesn't matter, as opposed to I own this, so it does matter? Like, do they pay any differently, or it's just the same customer across the board?
My experience is that it is, and I think we were talking about this before we started. It's, if you didn't call it lease here, pay here, and buy here, pay here, from the performance standpoint, there's not much difference there from what I've seen. They pay the same. It still comes down to making sure the car that you're putting in, and there's not much of a performance difference there that I have seen with running both simultaneously.
Okay.
How do you set the contract? Like, meaning term-wise, like, how do you say 3 years and you have to drive a certain number of miles, or do you have no limits on miles, or?
Yeah, no, so we put a, sorry, I don't want to take over here, but we put a mileage limit on it. Ours is 20,000 miles a year. Do we ever collect when they go over? No. It is, we try to make them know it up front. Some of them follow that, some of them we get back that are over that, but, as structured in the lease, yes, there is a mileage limit. Our term, again, depending on the ACV of the car you're selling, our term is typically about 3 years, just like it would have been if it's maybe a buy your pay your car with a little lower ACV.
We kind of track that as well. I tracked it for years. Every car, I would know how many days it was out, how many miles it was out. My average over about 12 million miles was our customers were driving about 17,700 miles a year. So our lease says 20,000 miles per year is what they're allowed. Some people are going to put 30,000 miles on your car in a year. But you also have to understand some people are going to put 5,600 miles a year on your car. So it's kind of an average, you know what I mean? I want to be over what I feel like is going to happen most of the time, so that there's no charges after the fact. But there are some times when people will put 40 or 50,000 miles on your car in a year, and you have to have those hard conversations. You depreciated my car in a year that I thought was going to take 3 years. So we need to do a little bit better job, trade them out, put them in a 12-month lease, and try to get them to pay off soon.
What's your average ACV?
Forever it ran 7,000, that's probably 8,500 now.
That's what about you?
Yeah, same. So we were probably 8,500 for a long time, and we've been closer to 11 and creeping back down into maybe the 9,500 to 10 range over the past few months.
What do you guys set your residuals at on your leases?
20%.
Yeah, ours are 30%.
30%? Both are 30?
20.
20?
Sorry.
And then do you charge a lease acquisition fee?
Yes.
And what is that?
$9.95.
Okay, it's a $7.
Ours is 895, so real close.
So on your $10,000 car, what's your down payment, price, what's that look like?
Yeah, so on a $10,000 car, that's going to be a car that we sell for $13,995 plus the $895 acquisition fee. In general, we're going to get it's going to be a $1,700 down payment. That's what we average on that car.
We're going to be a little bit more than that. We do like to do, since we do advertise prices online, we like to be kind of competitive online. So that's why a $8,500 car ACV, if the market on that's a $13,500, $14,000 car, that's where we're going to put it in, and then we're going to have the $995 back fee on top of that.
So about 16 months till you're in a profit position, each car, more or less.
what are you doing to determine the sale price of your vehicle? Standard markup or
What
book
I do is
value?
I go into my buying software, I use laser appraiser is what I do. Every car, as I price it, I put it in, I go in and I sort by miles, and I go and see where my miles on my car is, and if they're 13,500, 14,000, I put 13,500, you know what I mean? So I don't go in and say, I bought a $10,000 car, it's 15,500, because I know, I'm trying to look at what I know my customer's gonna look at whenever I list it online. Because I've got a act fee on top of that, we sell a service contract, we sell gap, you know what I mean? So my front profit is gonna total the same as providing warranty, but I try to price within the market.
Which is,
Yeah, we're similar. We're gonna look at the market, we're gonna price it to market, but a minimum of about $4,000 markup. So whichever is higher is what we're gonna use when we're setting our price.
So it's not really by any book values, like NADA?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as Joe, we'll look at kind of market, but no, we don't look at
Sure.
NADA at all. Gosh, I don't even buy the car sometimes, right? But
Right.
look at market, we use that, or $4,000 markup, whatever's higher.
On a $10,000 car, like, what would be kind of like the monthly rate that you put people at, or the weekly rate, or whatever it is?
Payment?
Yeah, payment wise.
Yeah, so our average payment, and it's up as the last couple of years cars have been up, but we're about $425 a month was our average payment. It's closer to $475 over the last couple of years. We don't want it to be that high. We want to get a little lower ACV car, but that's where we are right now.
Now, do they get insurance with that also, like, or do you do the what do they call it, the vehicle protection?
Yeah, CPI.
CPI.
So for us, full coverage is mandatory. We will pick up a car quicker for lapsed insurance than we will for a default on payment. So because we have a higher ACV car, do we do CPI? We do, but it is on a car that is what we call a recycle. It's been out a few times. We've collected on it. That's the only option. But for most of our cars, we do require full coverage and are fairly aggressive with it.
How do you guys evaluate the client for lease?
I'm
So,
sorry.
like, how do you guys evaluate the client? Let's say I came out from the street, do you guys not want to lease
Hey,
a car?
we underwrite just like buy your pay here underwrites. You know, we want to make sure their payment to income is hopefully under 20%. We want to make sure they've got jobs, and the underwriting is going to be very similar. That's not a differentiation factor, you know what I mean? You still want somebody that hopefully is going to take care of your assets.
So in terms of cash flow, if I've got that exact same deal, be buy here, pay here, lease here, pay here, talk about how the lease here contract cash flows better, or a group of them cash flow better, or how they do.
I mean, if you can start with a little bit better car and get the customer to buy in for the long term a little bit, hopefully they pay out on that car. You keep the car on the books 18 months or longer, you know.
Yeah, so I think that's when we look at it,
I guess the question is why lease here, pay here versus buy here, pay here in a nutshell? Tell me why. I mean, I know why you're doing it, because you don't want to pay all the,
Quicker, easier, and simpler.
right, okay.
I don't have a related finance company. I don't pay taxes on profits I haven't earned.
There you
I'm
go.
not going to. That's all I do.
Dustin?
what,
yeah, so there's, just follow what Joe said, there's, we got into it for the sales tax benefit, that was the cash flow, right? We didn't, in the state that was specific there. Once we got into it, there started to be, we were pretty cognizant of compliance. So we started to have, at that time, it's not that CFPB is not aggressive now, but they were very aggressive at the time we were getting into this. And we had concerns, even when we were bringing repossessions back, even if we weren't pursuing deficiencies, we had some concerns about reselling that car to another customer, no matter what we had them sign up front. So the leasing alleviated a lot of that concern for us. And I think everybody knows that does buy your pay here. If you can get a car that the customer pays and you get it back and you can sell it again, that is, you can't go buy that same car, right? You can't go buy that same car at the auction. So Joe's point, if we're buying a little better car up front and we're getting it through that, through that first term, and we can release it for a second term or a third term, and it stays on our books 5 or 6 years, then that becomes a very positive cash flow event for us. And with the full coverage on that second or third lease, when they crash it, those are usually very large cash flow events for us.
One of the things that we see as a benefit is in the title transferring, so we keep the titles in-house. So the customer goes and they get, as a registered leasee, they pay the sales tax and things of that nature. The title comes back to us on our name. So if the customer skips or anything like that, I'm not having to file for lost titles. I'm not having to chase lost titles or repossession. I'm not trying to get titles back. Titles are really simplified in Lease-Here, Pay Here. You're not chasing titles.
If I'm writing off a balance versus lease here or buy here, I don't know if we want to talk too much about the accounting, how it all works, but.
Well, before that question, just to think about the math on the cash side, if you're in a pay-as-you-go sales tax state, then instead of paying the sales tax all up front, you're paying just on the money that's collected. So if you think about, just to use round numbers, let's say you would pay $1,000, the customer would pay $1,000 more in sales tax for paid up front, and maybe it would be $100 compared to pay-as-you-go sales tax at that moment in time at the origination. So that's a difference of $900 on that individual transaction. If you're doing 20 vehicles a month, that's an $18,000 net difference of net cash to you in that month, and then you roll that out over time until your portfolio matures, and it's probably 24 months worth of that much more cash in your business for operations and any number of things.
And one last thing on that, because I'm sure we're going to get into this, somebody's going to ask, the concerns that LHPH help alleviate. As we use GPSs, we no longer use start and interrupt, but we used to use start and interrupt. And we had a lot of concern over disabling the starter. Some of the states we operated in were afraid they were talking about considering that as a repossession act. You got right to cure before you can do that. Again, Lease-Here, Pay Here kind of alleviated a lot of those concerns on if we use the GPS and we can disable the starter.
What money factor are you guys using to calculate your leases? 21?
Yeah, so ours is 30.
30?
Yeah.
So, Joe, nice to meet you, by the way, Bill. So we have, I guess there's two different sort of opinions that I've been getting. In going for sort of like the rent-to-own approach with a low residual versus going with it, like low terms. And so it's strictly based on the ROIC or return on cash, let's say for 5 years. Which is the better business model?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with like the CFPB. If you take a nice car, you don't want to make that lease look like a disguised sale. You know what I mean? So they come out, they're on record of stating that this has to be a lease if it's going to be a lease. So the reason why we don't do 10% down on a nice car in 4 years is because that's a disguised sales contract. You have to have a residual that makes it look like a lease. So it's not necessarily about ROI, it's about being compliant.
Sure. Aside from the compliance, though, like from a cash perspective, is it better for the term to be able to get more acquisition fees and whatnot?
I'll tell you why we set ours a little higher. We used to use 20% on our residuals. We want the car back, and a lot of customers are coming in and buying it for the residual at the end of the loan. Just giving us the cash, and we want that car back. That's even before the price of cars took off. So we raised our residual for it. That was the reason we raised it. We wanted to get the car back. If we're going to lose that car, we wanted to get some more money than we did.
At 30% residuals, which we're doing, how much are they exercising the buyback option?
Not very much, but it was a significant difference when it was 20% compared to 30%. We didn't. In fact, we discussed even raising it higher if that didn't work. But that was 100% of the reason that we raised ours is we wanted more of those cars back.
So will you finance that residual if they want to keep it at the end?
We do not.
No.
We do, but we have to bring it back in
Right.
and flip it to like a buy here, pay here.
Right.
But it's a short-term buy here, pay here.
Right. That's what we have.
Do you do that with a lot of your vehicles? Kind of dovetail the buy here, pay here after a lease?
We do.
And then just to expand on your question on the residual, whether you're going down to a rent-out, there's also an accounting reason why you wouldn't want to do that. So you have the disguised sale, but from an accounting side, there's federal tax income benefits, or really you're getting the depreciation to offset your federal tax income liability, because it's an operating lease if it meets certain classification, and that classification means that the certain sum of payments needs to not exceed that small percent of the residual. In the end, there has to be a percent of useful life that's used up, and then that's what helps it be classified as an operating lease. As an operating lease, that's how you go to the federal, the IRS and say, okay, I get these tax benefits because the vehicle's mine.
Is the accounting more difficult? That's something I've heard, just from Colorado, and we can't do a related finance company to get around the sales tax. So we've looked at it, but if people in Colorado have chosen not to, they always say because of the additional difficult accounting, and they mention liability, and I don't know enough about it to know what they're talking about. Is either one of those things an issue for you guys?
So you're saying in Colorado, you can't access the pay-as-you-go sales tax?
Right, you have to pay the sales tax up front.
Okay, so how does
Unless you do a lease, I mean, a lease would get you around that, but people in Colorado have spoken to, so they don't want to do a lease because of the complicated accounting and the liability. And
Well, I don't know about the liability. I will say that certainly there is more to the accounting. I don't know if more difficult. It is different. And, I think one of the things you would ask at the end is, was the one tip you'd have somebody get into this, is you need to have somebody that knows this side of the business. We started out just using our regular accountant that also did construction companies and also did this. And you need, in my opinion, you need to have somebody that knows this space. Maybe not as your full-time accountant, but certainly to help you get set up and started. It is different.
and if someone hits somebody and suddenly the car is yours, you have more personal liability.
Sorry, Joe.
I mean, you're asking what ifs that don't really ever happen. I mean, they could happen, but we're all in the risk business. You hear that quite often, is liability. I mean, what is real and what is what if, As far as the accounting side, I think the accounting side on the lease here, pay here is so much simpler because it's basically depreciation accounting. As long as you're following the rules, pretty much any accountant, they know how to depreciate vehicles. And it comes down to you whether you want to take 100% bonus depreciation for a couple of years and not be a taxpayer and then pay more, or you want to take a little bit of bonus depreciation now and pay a little bit as you go. So that's why I think it's so much easier on the lease here, pay here because of the accounting side, not having to sell it, not having to recoup it, not having to file for refund of taxes and things of that nature. It's depreciation accounting.
And I agree. That's when I said it's not necessarily difficult, it's just different. But as far as your liability of your customer hitting somebody, the Graves Amendment has stood the test of time on that. We've even got a form letter now. We still get notices from insurance companies or attorneys that your customer and your car hit, and we send them a form letter stating the Graves Amendment, and it is 100% of the time in the last we heard about it. So will that always be the case? I don't know, but I think there's been enough case law that I'm confident and comfortable with that.
What about this new accounting deal that goes into effect next month? Does that affect the leasing the same
The
way?
CECL that he was talking about this morning,
Yeah, I missed that. I apologize. I came in about 5 minutes late.
I agree with him on that. I hadn't, that was the first I'd heard of that. But just makes me glad that I'm doing leasing because hopefully that's a regulation that we don't have to follow.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with CECL having an impact on the lease side of it. I know we as a lender have CECL of the storm already, so we already did all the preparations for that. I don't think that has been an issue for you all yet.
What DMS systems are you using for leasing and why?
Great
Why should that?
So I use DealPack. I've used it for 10 years, so it's just something that I'm used to. They've got a very good accounting system and a leasing module within that. So that's just one on there.
Yeah, so we use AutoMaster systems, again, used it since 2001. Both up from the operating side and working with clients as a moderator, that's really the two. DealPack and AMS, in my opinion, you can't go wrong with either one of those. They have a really robust leasing system that works, the reports work, they work for your vendors. I don't have enough experience to say that some of the other DMSs don't, but I know those two are really good.
Since there's no conditional sales contract, in a sense, what kind of contracting do you do for these?
We do a closed-end lease purchase contract. We use a Walters Clears contract. I mean, everything's disclosed up front. The lease payments are here, the residuals here, says they can own the vehicle. It's all disclosed how we get to a zero balance.
Exactly the same.
And it's provided by, who gives it to you?
Our DMS provides our lease agreement.
Okay.
Same for us.
Okay, we've talked a lot about tactical stuff, which we can jump into any other questions that you have. From maybe a bigger 10,000 foot view, strategic level, over the last 2.5 years, there's been a lot of changes. How did your program help you get through that?
Well, I think a lot of it is what Dustin has talked about and how we're hoping to own the car at the end of the term. So therefore, if we can start, everybody in here has had to pay more for your cars. So if we can go up a little bit on payment, I know I'm going to get a good car back at the end. That's been our biggest benefit in the last couple of years, is because I know my residual value, and I probably should go up a little bit. We've considered going up to 25% on our residual. Things have been working currently, so we haven't did that. But I know the car is worth more now, and I don't know that we're going to go back to the olden days of the car prices.
It sounds like you were touching on the affordability of the payment to the customer, where you inched it up, where you didn't greatly increase it, and did that give you any sort of competitive advantage?
We felt like we did because we got a lot better car for a little bit more payment, and we think that the customers are staying in those cars a little bit longer.
Yeah, so we took the same approach. I was probably like a lot of guys and girls that when prices started going crazy, so we're just not going to pay that for cars, and then we lived up and had an empty lot. So we had to, really it has not changed. We're trying to buy a good car, recondition it properly, and underwrite it properly, with the main thing being payment to income. And we're trying to stay, as our spread went down a little bit, and what the payment we're getting from the customer, yes. Because their income hasn't really changed that much, but and there's been some benefits. Again, as we've got cars back the last couple of years, obviously they've been worth more than sometimes than when we sold them 2 years before that. But we will, I think, coming up on the next 2 years, we will continue taking that approach. Are we buying the lowest cost car we can that we're confident is a good car, reconditioning and trying to underwrite it correctly?
Because your residuals are so high, customers don't buy them out, what percentage of those cars do you actually sell, take to the sale? Not reprocess, recycle?
what percent go to the auction or
Yes.
what percent recycle?
You wouldn't resell to a customer.
You know, I don't think that's a huge difference in buy here, pay here versus lease-here, pay here. The car towards the end of its life, you know, maybe 15%, roughly.
I was gonna say ours runs about 20% that when we get back, we dispose of. But we start with a fairly new low mileage car, but we will, if we feel confident in their mechanic condition, we will run them to the end.
Because we all have a customer that come in that might not make the 1,800 income. You know, maybe they had 1,500 or 1,600. You know, maybe this car, instead of taking it to auction and selling it for 1,500, 1,200, I sell it for 39. I get somebody on the street, a little on a year's worth of payments, and it helps them and it helps us. You know, so I'd rather do that than just don't sell it out. But I want to make sure that it doesn't go back out on a 3-year term. You know, the car's not going to last.
What would be an ideal car? Like, meaning, you said low miles, but what's low miles? Like, you know, what year range?
I mean, that's different for everybody, of
Sure.
course. That depends on your business model, you know. When we go to the auction, you know, we like to buy 15, 16 models. You know, we would like to buy them back for $100,000. You know, we've been buying a lot of 105 to 115,000 miles. Primarily trying to stick into a newer body style that the customer has some pride of ownership in. You know, because if we get into an older body style or 2 older body styles, some people want to look with a new body style just like you and I would.
So exactly the same. We want to buy as new of a car as we can for as least amount as we can, right? With as few miles, but we're probably almost identical to Joe. We're going to try to be in that 15 to 16 model for the most part. There's exceptions. We buy older cars than that, and we're going to try to be back about 100,000 miles. Specifically here in Texas, obviously we buy and sell a lot of trucks. That's not so much in our other locations. We're not buying those with less than 100,000, but. So a little bit location dependent, but yeah, that is our basic average model.
Now, is there credit reporting that can be done to, you know, for clients to
Sure.
have them build the credit? Does it work the
Sure,
same?
we report credit to TransUnion.
Yeah, we do as well.
We tell the customer, we normally are going to pull your TransUnion, but we're also going to push your TransUnion. So we feel like if a customer pays on time, they should be rewarded for that. If they don't pay on time, then they should be rewarded for that as well.
How often do your customers repeat?
Quite often. You know, the good customers, we put them back in another car. I tell them right up front, you know, we're starting a relationship today. You know, hopefully you're going to come back in 18 months. I don't need a new application because I have your payment history. If you've been good on the payment history, we're going to get you another car. If you haven't been good, we're probably not.
Do you require another down payment than just like you're starting over, or do you just roll them into something else?
To me, the customer is worth more than the car. So the customer to me is my asset. If I want the customer in my family, if they'll sign up and they don't, I ask them right up front, do you want to put a down payment? Because obviously, money up front lowers your payment. It's real simple to me. My customer's worth $100,000, my car's worth $10,000. I want the customer over the car. If they don't want to put it down, we do the deal in 5 minutes.
Is that where you figure your customer's worth about $100,000, or is that just the?
That's but that customer is worth 10 times what the customer that I don't know is worth.
Sure.
Again, we didn't plan this ahead of time. We're almost exactly the same, but we're very, very aggressive when we start getting a low balance. We consider a low balance as maybe even as low as $5,000. We are aggressively pursuing that customer. They come in, they almost the exact same word track. The more down payment you can put, the lower the payment's going to be. How much do you have? But we want that other car back, so we can, you know, recondition it and release it to somebody else. But we want that customer in another car. So a large portion of them are repeat customers. We're very aggressive with it.
And how many leases do you get out of a typical piece of inventory?
depending on how far they go, you might recycle a car 3 or 4 times, you know, before you really need to put it down on a 12-month deal and get the car out of the family.
I think that 3 is probably average.
So of your yearly deals, how much is new inventory versus recycled inventory? Has it eased your inventory burden because
Yes.
you're recycling so much of your
Yes.
inventory?
So last month, 75% of our new leases were recycled inventory.
Ours isn't that high.
And normally it runs, excuse me, I'm sorry, normally we would be roughly 50/50. Last month it was,
No, we're not saying it's a big part of what, it's closer to 50/50 recycling.
Will you do buy here, pay here, and lease here, pay here side by side, or will you let someone walk if they want to do buy here, pay here?
my lender doesn't offer buy here, pay here.
So this was
And I'm the
really,
lender. No, because all of the advantages for doing leasing is what I'm gonna sell to the consumer. And if they wanna do buy here, pay here, I don't have a source that will do that.
If you started that way, it would be ideal, but with us
I mean, because
doing buy here,
I
pay
have
here-
to, we all have to have our staff be able to carry whatever program it is to our customers. If I let my staff know that we don't know whether buy here, pay here is better or lease here, pay here is better, then that's what they feel, and they take the path of least resistance with the customer. If you hang your hat on something and your staff hangs their hat on something, then that's what they carry forward and that's what they preach. So we don't have those lenders in-house.
we have the occasional customer that will balk at the lease, but it is far and again made up for by the customer that will never go anywhere else and do anything but leasing. Like, they love it so much, that is what they're gonna come back and do. So it was one of my concerns when we first started, is how hard is this gonna be to sell? It's just not. Every once in a while, a customer doesn't wanna do it, but every week we have customers that come back that's all, I wanna do that lease thing, I want to get another one of those leases. Hey, your credit's good enough, we can probably get you financed for, a bank deal, and I want that lease.
You know, and what was said before the meeting even started, the reality is, guys, we all lease. Every one of us. Because what is a lease? A lease is paying for the use of the car until we're done with the use of the car. And then whether you have a balance that is owed on your books, or I have a residual that's owed on my books, we still have to dispose of that. You know what I mean? So unless your customers are paying their cars off to a zero balance, if they still owe on the car, what's the difference in owing the lien holder $1,500 or owing me $1,500 on a residual? We're all leasing.
I was wondering what all of your opinions were on these like subscription-based programs that are extremely short in nature. And I was just wondering if you had any opinions on those type of things, not that of business models.
I have an opinion, but I think it's costly. It's really hard to model. And we've seen a lot of entrants into that subscription type base, and the payments have to be really high to account for that break-even point of what the average is in how quickly it's brought back in to be recycled. Because it costs you as the dealer money to get that vehicle prepared again, go through the inspection process, and get to another customer. So at this point, I haven't seen it proven out. However, this is a version of a subscription type model. And if you can get past 13 months or 18 months or whatever your internal number is, then it is like a subscription program.
Sure.
And you can offer in your lease contract a trade-in, whatever the fee is going to be. Hey, for $400, you can trade it into X after 15 months.
I'd say another thing, whenever we first started, and this was brought up earlier, there was not as many capital providers in the space. This guy right here has a great company, they're great people, and they fund leases every day, all day. So check out LHPH Capital, great company to work with.
And we didn't plan that.
Hey, Dustin, when you said at the end of your Sorry, when you said at the end, and you said the customer says, hey, I want that lease, what's the one reason why they say that?
And this is probably a little bit specific to, I don't know if this would be specific to our Texas customers, but to our Arkansas customers, it's the sales tax, right? It's the sales tax, it's the ability to come in, just what Tim was saying, after a period of time, and just, they see a car they like on the lot, that they just flip into, and, you know, we don't let them do that in 6 months, right, without paying a new down payment. If they're 18 months into the contract, 24 months in the contract, and we see a lot of that. And those are the two big reasons.
Now, the mentality of the customer, let's say, you know, are they seeing it more like, I'm renting this car, and so therefore, you know, once they get into the contract, they say, oh yeah, you know what, I don't like this car, so how do you deal with that?
Sure, somewhat. But that's why you also have to explain, you know, this is a plan for you to get to a zero balance. You know, this isn't a short-term subscription model. This is a benefit to you that you can come back if something happens. You know, we have a lease termination fee that you can walk away from the paperwork. Nowhere else in town can you have a walk-away option. I remember whenever I was in the franchise store, back in 05 or 06, there was a company in Canada that came out and they sold all these independents a walk-away license. I mean, it was huge.
What would that fee be, just out of curiosity? What would that lease termination fee be?
Our lease termination fee is $495.
That's exactly what ours is too. And to answer your question, I had that same issue when we were just doing buy here, pay here. I mean, the customer didn't like the car anymore and didn't think they were ever going to own it because they weren't going to pay for it to the end. It's so much of this, I'd say 90% of this is, again, if you just took away the labels, the LHPH or buy here, pay here, it's the same customer, it's the same underwriting, it's the same collections, it's the same business with some advantages.
Are you able to collect that lease termination fee?
Right.
Some, not all the time.
You don't pursue it though?
We do pursue in court, we do garnish in court, we do go to court. Primarily because, you know, at one point in time, the word got out when we were not doing it, that, hey, go get the car from them, use it as long as you want, tear it up, take it back, they're not gonna do anything with it. So we kind of had to change the talk on the street that we had to come back and do.
And you're pursuing that $495?
That is part of the return balance, if they're over their miles, if they're past due. These things kind of add up a little bit, but we'll go out there.
Okay, so this is, we were like past due. I didn't do a great job facilitating on timing. If you guys want to stick around and pepper these guys with questions, I'm sure they'd love to, so we'll give them room back. Just wanted to thank everybody for coming, and let's give a hand to our two panelists.